I mean, European soccer with a big shakeup with this Super League, and we have a great conversation planned there because it's just such a strange headline, but also Europe trying to be a bit like America in how they operate sports in terms of some of the big teams. We're talking about the biggest, the Manchester United and the Real Madrids and the Barcelonas and all of the biggest European clubs saying we want to come together as 20 and have a permanent closed league that would only involve 5 teams moving up or down and 12 teams that would be permanently in it. So sort of protecting the richest of the league. Really fascinating stuff. And we'll get into that. But your initial take on the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's preposterous. I mean, myself, I'm not the biggest soccer fan, but I can, a lot of it resonates with me as a fan of baseball and seeing the MLB and the owners in that league taking motions to increasingly monetize the sport away from what the fans are looking for. And you see that a lot with the runner on second base rule, and a lot of fans are outraged by that. This is a much more drastic move. Basically, these top teams in each league outside of the German teams, Bayern and Dortmund, are making their own league. And by doing that, they're really prioritizing their own league over, let's say, the Champions League, which they would have no longer participated in. So a team like Leicester City that won the Premier League a couple years back, they would not be able to compete for a bigger trophy. And the Premier League trophy would be in many ways a non-trophy of any significance when you have the top 6 teams not competing in it. So it was a selfish move by these top owners who, in their reasons for creating this league, cited COVID a bunch of times and the loss in revenue from that. Meanwhile, there are these smaller clubs that are suffering exponentially compared to the bigger clubs, and they cannot have the power to go and create their own super league because they're barely making it by as a bottom tier team in these bigger leagues. So it was definitely a selfish move by these big time owners that did not consider the fans at all. And it's if you're a fan of soccer, you're excited to see these teams begin to pull out, and the old ways of the soccer leagues and the old form that they are put together start to return.
Yeah, and we're using the past tense was because it is all but dead right now with only 4 teams, 3 Spanish teams and Juventus from Italy still kind of sticking it out, but it won't last long. And you're right. It just completely sort of says forget about all this history that European soccer has, and you take away the national pride that comes with the league that you grew up rooting for in the club. If you're a Juventus fan, if you're a Juve fan your whole life, and now they're going to play in some kind of international European Super League, and the name is also terrible, the Super League. I mean, they didn't even try to pretend here that this was supposed to be some kind of elite thing, and nobody likes elite things. So they try to create that. Imagine you're the lifelong fan, and now you've got to go start watching other teams. You got to start watching Juventus play Real Madrid all the time. I'm sure it would be great competition, but it's just not what you do. It's not what you're familiar with. So this is a great case of the fans sort of winning here, because there are other factors. There were governments at play and there were other money stakes at play, but it ultimately crumbled by this tagline, which had started by the poor and stolen by the rich. And you just saw massive protest across Europe. They take their soccer very seriously, and they weren't tolerating this stuff.
Yeah, I definitely have to give it to the fans for taking such a strong opposition towards these moves by the bigger clubs. At the end of the day, this was just a selfish decision by these owners, and they weren't really looking for to barely make it by. No, they were looking for as much revenue, as much money as they can get, and they saw the Super League as the easiest way they could get there. So you got to give it to the fans, UEFA, FIFA, all these organizations standing up against it. And Chris, I think one of the biggest moves was the move to say, hey, if you participate in this league, you're not allowed to play in the World Cup. I think that was really the turning point. Imagine not having the top players, Ronaldo, Messi, in that World Cup would be a huge hurt for the sport. And I think that's when these clubs started to realize that they needed to turn away from this ordeal.
Yeah, I think the influence of FIFA in that sense is important, but you may have said, you may have called their bluff if you're these clubs. I mean, are they really going to not let these guys play in the World Cup, the biggest superstars of the sport, in the event every 4 years? It very well could have been a bluff. I think it really came from the fans more than anything, who said we won't attend these games, we won't pay the ticket price. Um, the influence of the Glazer family, I think, is very interesting. They own Manchester United. They also own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they are an American sports family. They're an American family. And, it's hard to know, they were a big string puller in this. And this just seemed like the influence of the American model, which is a lot more profitable, which involves owners making hand over fist in a lot more way. Than 43 out of the 50 richest sports franchises on earth are American, because the model here is just a lot more profitable. And that's sort of thematic of business in general, American business versus European business. In these open league forums, you risk it all. You risk not being in the league. Um, and it's not the case in the closed league like the NFL or the MLS. So I just find that to be interesting. The fact that this American concept of how you ought to run a sports league infiltrated Europe and just got shut down. It couldn't have got shut down quicker. And the rollout was just so pathetic, and it was just such a botched situation. It leads you to believe that this was impossible from the start. But at first, soccer fans were scared. Soccer fans were definitely scared at first.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the rollout was awful. I mean, this announcement came 7 games left in the Premier League season. So for that reason, the timing couldn't have been worse for them to make this announcement. And you noted the American model. I think that's very interesting. I think with the way NBA is trending, and even leagues like the NFL, like stars versus stars, I think is the way owners see the most money created. And I think when you pin guys from different leagues together into a super league like Mbappe or Griezmann or Neymar or Messi, just to name a few, and you put them together in a super league, and they're going to play each other more, and it would be in a tournament style, maybe single elimination tournament. I'm not sure about the details of what they had planned heading into the Super League, but if you had a style of that sorts, it would make sense that that would bring in the most viewership from a worldwide standpoint. Maybe diehards in England and Italy that really rooted for their clubs for a while would not be a fan of the Super League, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it would have drawn a lot of people to the sport to watch these games. On the other hand, I think for the longevity of the sport and keeping it a traditional league base, I think it was an awful move. And all the diehard football fans, soccer fans, none of them want to see this happen. So it's really good and really exciting for soccer that they're starting to backpedal on these moves, and it's going to be an old traditional league-based Champions League for the foreseeable future.
Right. And the fact that the Champions League already exists gives you the opportunity to see this. And then you can go see to the World Cup, but it just feels so backward to me. And I'm not the biggest, I'm not a huge European soccer fan. I loosely follow Italian soccer, and my understanding of it is that the pride that you have in your local team is enormous. And this is just co-opting that, and it's corrupting it. And I don't know what's up with UEFA and FIFA. I know that there's a good deal of corruption in their histories. But as you said, I'm glad to have seen all of this just sink, and largely led by the fans.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think one of the biggest things to think about when you're viewing the idea of the Super League is that all these major teams are basically punching their ticket into a trophy. Like, they didn't have to work to get there. I mean, a lot of the bigger clubs, if they had not qualified for the Champions League, they would not be able to participate for that trophy. Meanwhile, a team like Leicester City, if they outperformed a team like Tottenham, would be able to make it into the Champions League over them. So I think by seceding into this so-called Super League, they were these bigger clubs were basically securing their place in this tournament where they could guarantee revenue, and leaving these smaller clubs in the dust that could potentially make a run and beat some teams and enter the elimination round of the Champions League. So I think in that sense, it was really a selfish move by the clubs, knowing the power they had and the star power they had, saying, listen, if we just come together and make our own club, we're going to guarantee revenue. We're going to have the best stars go up against each other, and we won't have to worry about UEFA spending and giving us money or not giving us money for winning Champions League. So I think all of that was calculated, and it was a selfish move, like I said before, leaving these smaller clubs in the dust and not thinking about their own problems and own lack of revenue from COVID.
No, I think you hit it on the head, and the COVID thing is something that you could just read through so easily. I mean, for you to claim deficit from COVID, just it makes me laugh, because these are obviously wealthy clubs, and that's not the cause here. This has been something that's been in the works for longer than any of us know, behind closed doors, trying to make something happen. And it got shut down so quickly, and in that, I think we both agree, is pretty encouraging. So the Super League is a mess, and it absolutely tanks. We'll be sure to keep our eyes on that. Again, there are a couple stragglers who are trying to stay in there, but by now it looks all but dead.